Okay, I just want to do a quick video about how to write up a lab, because for a lot of you, you didn't get to write one up in grade 11 because of COVID. So I gave out this page today that really goes through how to write it up. Just to explain this top part, above the solid line, this is really your cover page. I just didn't want to waste a whole page of paper to show it to you. So what would it really look like? In somewhere top middle of the page, you would put the title. This is a grade 11 one. So Speed of Sound Lab. You don't have to put the LHHS on there. For you, it would be Inclined Plane Lab. Okay. And then towards the bottom would be your name, your partner's name, and of course Physics 12-2. And then over here, the day that you did it. So it doesn't need to be Monday, but whatever day this is, Wednesday or Thursday, March 17, 18. Okay, so that's the student's name, partner's name, class, and then the lab was conducted and the teacher. Now there are some people who like to do a picture on their lab, so you're most welcome to do that, as David did. Okay, but you don't have. Pardon me, but you don't have to. So that's the cover page. Then inside the report, you will have the purpose. So in the lab that we just did, I gave you the purpose. You can copy this purpose word for word. So do purpose and then type exactly this. And yes, it does need to be typed. Then next is the hypothesis, which I had asked you to do before the lab. And hypothesis is simply a prediction or predictions based on knowledge, past experience, or intuition. And you have to come up with this. And obviously, it's a prediction, so you need to do it before you do the lab, which was why I had asked you to do it beforehand. Okay? It does not matter to me if your hypothesis is right or not. So here on the lab, I told you what I want you to predict, which for the unfinished block and for the finished block, which surfaces do you think would have the smallest coefficient of friction and which would have the largest for each block. And again, there it says they don't have to be the same for the two blocks, but more important for me, doesn't have to be right. So no stressing. If you made the prediction, you did the lab, and they were wrong. You don't lose points for your hypothesis being incorrect. You'd lose points if you predicted that Isaac was going to knock the board over and everything was going to come crashing down before the end of the lab. Even if Isaac did that, it's still not connected to the purpose of the lab. And so even if you were right in predicting that, your hypothesis has to be connected to the purpose of the lab. But it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, because in the conclusion, you're going to go back and talk about it and either say how brilliant you were to predict correctly and why you thought it would be so, or how you had thought something but discovered it was something else and this was what you learned. So either way, it gives you something to talk about in the hypothesis or in the conclusion. All right, materials. I think I have all the materials here. Usually I try to give you the materials. Sometimes maybe we add something in that I'm not aware of when I'm typing it up, but a block of finished wood, block of unfinished plank, sheet of foil, sheet of wax paper, piece of fabric, and meter stick. So I think everything is there. Procedure. What should you do? Okay, so if you notice in how to write up the procedure, it says it's a step-by-step chronological listing of what was done. It has to be written in past tense and it has to be impersonal. Although you may initially be given a procedure, the one you write in your lab must be in your own words and must be what you actually did, as sometimes we change the procedure from what is given in order to maximize results. So luckily in this one, you didn't get a procedure, so you don't have to worry about did we change it. But it has to be past tense and impersonal. So what did you do? So you would say all the materials were gathered. You would not say we gathered all the materials because that would not be impersonal. So impersonal means you can't say I, we, my partner, David, Jessica. Like you can't say any names or refer to any names. So instead you would say all the materials were gathered and taken to the lab bench. Then you would say something like the unfinished block of wood was placed on one end of the plank that end of the plank was slowly raised until the block of wood began to slide. At the instant the block of wood began to slide, the raising of the plank was stopped, and the height to which the plank was, that end of the plank was raised, was measured with a meter stick, and the height recorded on a chart. Oh, and I guess even before that, I think I missed a step, you measured the length of the plank. So you would say something like the length of, I'm looking to see what I called it, block of wood, unfinished wood, plank for the incline. So you would say the plank to be used for the incline plane was measured with a meter stick to determine its length. The length was recorded in the data table. Then you would go on with what I was saying about one end of the block of wood was placed on one end of the plank, and that end was slowly raised until the plank began to move. And then it would be something like, next the wax paper was placed on top of the plank and held in place. The unfinished block of wood was placed on top of it again. That end was slowly raised again until it began to move, etc. Okay, so past tense, impersonal. That's for the procedure. And really the procedure, anybody outside the room should be able to pick up your lab and do it exactly as you did based on your procedure. So you need to be clear. You need to actually list the steps. So you don't just say the height was measured. Well, was it measured with your phone? Was it measured with your pen? Or was it measured with a meter stick? So you actually have to say, how did you measure it? Okay, so that's for the procedure. The next one is the results and observations. So here, all the data, the tables, the charts, the graphs, and the calculations, as well as any answers to questions. So in this lab, I was kind, no questions. That won't always be the case. But your chart goes in there. So not this chart. You're going to, in Word, you're going to insert, and you're going to create a chart. And it'll be a chart with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So insert a table, 5 columns, 9 rows, okay, and then type in all these things. It's really not that hard. If you don't know how to do a table in Word, come see me, because it's a good thing to know before you leave high school and go out into the outside world. Okay, so you create it, you type all your stuff in. You're also going to show me calculations. Which ones? Well, right here, the bottom of your lab, it says, please include in your results the calculations of how you found mu. So, well, the way you found the angle would have been using trig, so with these two sides. So you don't necessarily have to show me all of them, but you should show me one. You should say something like, the angles in the table were found by using, and draw your little triangle and label these two spots, and then show me the angle. Okay, but then to get mu, you're going to have to do sum of the forces. So go through the steps, sum of the forces in the y, sum of the forces in the x, get to the spot where you can find mu, and do it for one of them. Okay, fill in your numbers for one of them, and then you don't have to show me all the rest. You can just, with your calculator, do the others. But I do want to see one complete one. Okay, so that's for the results. Then the discussion. In the discussion, you need at least 5 sources of error. And usually I recommend, it has to be like we'll talk about sources of error in class, and you should always lead with the most important ones. And so if there are 6 that are really important, I don't want you to just have 5. You should have 6 really important ones. Some labs, it might be hard to find like 6 really important ones, so maybe there were just 5. You should always add an extra 1 or 2 just in case you don't do a good job on one, because if you only put 4 in, you lose a point. But if you put 6 in and one of them is not right, you don't lose any points. So at least 6. And you need to explain them, why they're a source of error, and what you would do to improve them. Okay, so all of that, 5 sources of error at least, explain, and what would you do to improve it. So what's a source of error here? It would be something like not stopping the plank just as the block began to move. Why would that be a source of error? Because you wouldn't be getting the static coefficient of friction then. What would you do to improve it? Maybe repeat it a whole bunch of times or be more careful. The last one, going to run out of time, is conclusion. Responds to the purpose, and the hypothesis needs to be longer than 1 sentence. Remind me to talk about this in class, because